William B. Henry, who has actually graciously agreed to, in the middle of his presentation for a whole day training event in Bozeman, Montana, to skip off for 15 minutes and come join us. So he's currently zooming in, and I just see him now on our screen. So we're absolutely good to go. Some things just work out smoothly. Thanks for the angels. So our next speaker is presentation. Well, I should start at the beginning. Sorry. Our next presentation will introduce us to diversity, equity, and inclusion at a high level. The session will provide key objectives related to DEI and give several tangible tools that we can take back and apply immediately. And a few months ago, Ann and Kim and I from the Chamber were able to go to the Western Area Chamber Executives Conference where in Arizona, which was great, where we got to meet William B. Henry. He was a keynote speaker there. And so we made every effort to be sure we could bring him to Northern Colorado. So I'm pleased to introduce William B. Henry, founder of the Be Better World. William specializes in having DEII conversations around leadership development, strategic planning, employee engagement, and culture building. He has more than 20 years of experience in enhancing the performance of individual executives, teams, and organizations. His background encompasses a wide range of programs and initiatives for organization design, cultural change, and professional development. His unique approach to leadership and organization development began during his 20 years in the blood banking industry, where William served as Regional Director of Human Resources, Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain Region, Regional Director of Blood Operations, and Vice President of Production Planning. William is also the founder of Be Better World, LLC, a self-empowerment movement geared toward developing professionals and youth to deal with real-time issues that stand in their way and how to take the next steps to success. His stance takes a different approach as he works directly with clients to implement strategies and teach skills that can be carried through every phase of life. Be Better World is gaining national attention, and his motto is, we all play a role. William, the screen is yours.
Thank you for such a well done introduction. So I am literally ecstatic to be on the call with you all. I'm trying to work through some particulars. So Yvonne, you might have to help me. Do you guys have the screen control or do I have it? I'm just trying to figure out what we got here.
You can try to launch your own slides and we'll see what happens.
Okay. So just to kind of give you guys some background, actually, I think I'll stay away from the slides. Just to kind of give you guys some background about what I do. Right now, the 50% of my work is in the DEI space, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I include another I in that space simply because I think implementation to this process becomes very, very important and is very rarely talked about. So what I want to do for the next 12 minutes or so is walk you through some of how we look at it, and we try to take the uncomfortable conversation to a more comfortable conversation. So the first thing I want to talk about is basically what is diversity? And diversity is simply 3 words. Again, we can give you academic definitions or something of that nature, but I think it's really important to understand that diversity is 3 things. It's respect for others, it's understanding culture, and appreciating variety. And I think if you understand those 3 things, it could lead you a long way down the road. Now, again, in our media set, a lot of times we talk about things such as race and ethnicity, which are all important. But again, when you think about diversity at its core, it's simply looking at variety, appreciating and respecting variety, and understanding diversity of thought is what drives business and is what drives businesses. So when we think about that in the business world, I like to think about it from 4 angles. Now, if you Google diversity, you could be reading from now to 2023. So I try to break it into 4 chunkable parts. And so we'll talk about it from this perspective. So there's what we have. There's something that we have that's called internal diversity. And internal diversity is your race, your age, your ethnicity. Those are things that you cannot change. And so when we think about it, we're all born with a certain set of DNA codes that we cannot impact. So those things we can't change. External things that have an influence on us is our cultural beliefs, our historical beliefs. Those kind of things are things that can change and do change over time depending upon what we are influenced by. So internal, external. The third is what I call the organizational workplace when we talk about diversity. So for those of you all who have had more than one job, you bring a different culture to your second job, and that culture is instilled in you whether you believe that they did the right thing and you stayed for a time, or you left because the culture wasn't right. You bring that information into your new space. So it's very important to understand that that too is a part of diversity. And then the other part is the culture that you are a part of. So what I mean by that is this. So whether you are your socioeconomic status, the influence of what you believe, all those things impact your ability, and also is a part of the diversity model that we look at. So just to repeat those, there's internal diversity, there's external diversity, there's organizational workplace diversity, and there's culture. Now, again, if you Google it, you could talk about diversity from a lot of angles, but for the business world, those are the 4 angles that we like to focus on. So that's diversity. Secondly, we talk about equity, and I want to be sure that you understand the difference between equity and equality. And people use those words interchangeably, and I would highly recommend that you do not use those words interchangeably because they mean something totally different. So for those of you all who are writing, equality is giving individuals the same thing irregardless to their needs. So the example I like to use here is if I walked around the room full of millionaires and I walked around and there was 2 individuals who were less fortunate and I gave everybody $100 bill, I think it's safe to say that the millionaires probably do not need the $100 bills. The people who are less fortunate as far as finances are concerned probably do need $100 bills. However, equality looks at them all equal. Equity looks at individuals and meets them where they are. So this is very, very important. So if in an equitable situation, I would actually do more work to find out what the individuals in the room needed, and I would make sure that was assessment. So equity is hard, and here's why equity is hard, because you actually have to understand the role and the players in the room that you're working with. So in businesses, a lot of time we talk about equality because it's easier. We have one rule, we do it this way, and that makes sense to a degree. So I want to be clear, equality is not bad. So for you talking about things like an attendance policy, equality makes absolute sense. If you say to be to work at 8 o'clock, individuals don't show up at 8 o'clock, you handle everybody the same. But when you're trying to grow a business or an organization and make sure that you're honing in on your great talent, I think you have to understand that equity is as important, if not sometimes more important than equality. So the example I give people all the time is that you hire two very, very talented people and one has a hearing impairment. You will decide that you understand that this person needs a telephone that allows them to hear better, amplified device, and you don't give it to person A who doesn't need it. You give it to person B who needs it. That's an equitable situation. What I advise you against is making sure that you don't give the person who doesn't need it the device. However, you explain to them that this is what this person needs to meet the standards of the job. That's the difference between equity and equality. So again, we talked about diversity a little bit in 4 segments. We talked about the difference between equity and equality a little bit. And now let me move you to something before we get to inclusion about times in life we're trying to change individuals' stance about what diversity, equity, inclusion is. I am here to submit to you that if you're in this space, your role should not be to change individuals. Our role in this space is to provide tools and concepts and allow individuals to move at the pace that they see fit to move at. I think a lot of times why this information gets a bad light is because we're trying to shove it down individuals' throat and we're not giving them the opportunity to digest the information at their pace. So if you think about change, change has some very, very unique qualities. So change always starts with the belief. And those beliefs lead you to a thought, which leads you to feelings. From that, you start thinking about the result of the change. And we make these changes on a daily basis. add into this conversation something as heavy as a topic as diversity, equity, and inclusion, you will see why we should be very, very careful about trying to change people as opposed to trying to provide them information to do the work necessary in this space to be successful. So people ask me frequently, are you here to change our mind? And I said, I can't change your mind in a seminar in 15 minutes about what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. What I hope to do is lay some tools on the table, and you take those back to your respective workplaces and you use those how you see fit. The last piece of this is with regards to changes, you have to be in the workspace authentic about your change. And what I mean by that is this: your staff, your employees will see through if you're just doing the work to check the box. So I think it's very, very important as you start to explore diversity, equity, and inclusion that you are authentic in the space so that you do not allow your employees to see any cracks in that armor, because trust me when I tell you, they will take advantage of those cracks if they see a disingenuous spirit when you're working in the space. So that's diversity, that's equity, and that's how we change. So now let's talk about a little bit about inclusion. So inclusion is very important because I always use this quote: when nobody gets left behind, everyone moves forward. So this is very important. I'll say it again: when nobody gets left behind, everybody moves forward. I say that for a couple of reasons. It's important that the majority understand where we're moving. Now, the majority could be any, depending upon the room, it could be any subset of population of individuals. So it doesn't have to be about color, it could be about gender, it could be about disabilities, but the majority has to understand. And the reason this information is sometimes not accepted as openly as other things is because people fear a sense of loss. So let me give you an example here. So when I say to you, if you're working in a standard business and I say out loud that we're going to add a trans-neutral bathroom into the environment, people's initial response to that is one or two things. What does this mean for me, and what am I going to lose? So in the inclusion space, your job as leaders is to remove the fear associated with that. So keep in mind, I didn't say I was going to add a trans-neutral bathroom and take away a female bathroom or a male bathroom. I said addition. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it's highly important that people understand that this is not about addition through subtraction. This is simply about addition. We're trying to bring individuals and thought to the table that wasn't included in the past. That's not to say that we're going to remove information or individuals that were already at the table. I think that's where this message simply gets lost. So diversity, 4 steps. Equity, again, the difference between equity and equality. Equity is meeting people where they are. Equality is giving everybody what they need, regardless of their need, giving everybody the same thing, regardless of their need. Inclusion is making sure that all parties are involved to include the majority. So I want to go back to the majority for a second, because this is really important. When you're talking about in a business setting, the majority normally holds your institutional knowledge. So you want to make sure that they understand the process and the strategy behind why you may be implementing something. Now, this is the other important point. That doesn't mean they're always going to agree. In this space, we're not looking for agreements, we're looking for understanding. And those are 2 totally different things. So as you work through this space, again, I'm going to make the assumption that you're going to be working with highly intelligent people. However, they do have emotions. Your job is to manage the emotions so that you can get to the real work. So we're not looking for agreements. I'm looking for the opportunity to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion at a higher level. So when we talk about that, that's very, very important. The last thing that I will leave you all with, and I'll leave 2 or 3 minutes for questions, is the communication and language that's used when presenting this information is probably the most paramount thing. So I have several people on the phone. I'll ask you guys to do a very quick exercise. You don't have to report it out to anybody, but I'll tell you how it works. go back to your staff and you ask them this question, and I'll show you how important language is when you're talking about this. You ask them this. There's this drink that we are all familiar with. It's in a 12 ounce, it's in a can, and it's 12 ounces and it has fizz in it. And if you ask your staff to write down what they call it anything from pop to Coke to soda to whatever the flavor is. Think about how the language impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you have to be careful with the language that you use. You want to be surgical about how you apply it. And lastly, you want to make sure it's not something that's used to check a box. This is something that you're using as a cultural shift. This is where your organization needs to be going. But if you're using it to check the box, I've seen more failure than success in that process. So just to reiterate that again, you talk diversity, equity, inclusion, realizing that change plays a huge role in that space as well. And then from this change space comes, how do you implement the work? And for those of you all who have not been through a process of implementation, in the next series, next week, we'll get into how you implement something that's as heavy as this process. But what I will tell you is that you have to be diligent in it. Understand that you will hit some roadblocks when you're working through this space, but you can't allow the roadblocks to get you off the end goal. This is one of those spaces where I can tell you, given that egos, emotions, and ignorance is involved, again, none of those things are bad if controlled. You will have to understand that will be your job to manage that process. And with that small, quick snippet, I know I just gave you a fire hose approach, but I wanted to put that information out. We'll dig deeper in the session in the following week, but I wanted to put that out so that you had an understanding. I will open it up to any questions that I might be able to answer.
William, it's Yvonne. I haven't seen any questions yet, so you must have done a very good job of your explanation, which is amazing. And we're super grateful that you could come today for that, in between your whole day session that you're doing up in Bozeman, and that you could give us this teaser for this 15 minutes, because we will have you next week on the 14th from 1 to 2 via Zoom. And again, you can register for that. There's no charge. The first start of our talent series, we're starting with William B. Henry, and we're super excited about that next week on Thursday, right? The 14th. 14th is, I should look at my calendar. Yes, Thursday the 14th from 1 to 2. So thank you so much. There is one comment that says, yes, thank you, William. So we really appreciate and getting to know you beforehand, so that people, and we have quite a few people already signed up for that event next week. So we hope we get a lot of others as well. So good luck with the rest of your workshop today in Bozeman. And thank you so much for joining us today.
You guys have a good day.